Ahead of the President's much-anticipated State of the Nation address coming up this week, I'm joined in studio by the DA Parliamentary Leader, Mmusi Maimane. He's going to speak to us about what the DA wants the President to address, and he's also going to answer some of your questions. Mmusi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I think it's a fair guess that the DA is really hoping the President will address the country's energy crisis, considering your march or your memorandum last week. Won't you speak to us about that?
Well, we embarked on a Power to the People tour, and that we wanted to be clear what some of South Africans' issues are, what they want the President to talk about. We didn't want to we wanted to be on site to hear. And it's been an amazing tour to have heard from the people of this country what they'd like. And of course, yes, energy is but one set, but energy is a function of economic lifeblood. And South Africans are saying our economy isn't growing fast enough to create jobs. It's growing at 1.4%. And even at that, South Africans are finding it harder to find work. 35% of people can't find work. So the President must be able to speak about that. He must be able to speak not only about the electricity crisis, but equally so about other economic infrastructure. As you know, Gauteng has tolling as a function of building roads, but the President's own Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Committee has been reported that it's lagged behind in terms of achieving its own targets. So the President must speak about that. He must equally so speak about institutions and the strength of institutions. You know, when we talk about the NPA, we talk about the Hawks, we talk about SARS. These are things that hold a democracy together. And if the President doesn't speak about those, they're in a dire state at the moment. They are leaderless. We need to be able to have leaders in those institutions so that we can achieve the outcomes that we want. Thirdly, I think there is a question about education. We've seen this year that the matric pass rate is on a decline. Yes, we've improved on access to education. Now the question must be, how do we improve on the quality of that education so that we can have South Africans who are key, educated, learned, are able to be key contributors to the economy so we can grow it. And that's a fundamental issue going forward. And then South Africans are facing contact crime. You know, we walk around in fear of one another, and that's why we need to be able to address how we deal with a police service that serves the people of this country. And then, yeah, so I think if it's amongst those basket of issues, I think this is an opportunity for the President to be honest with South Africans, to really address that issue of load shedding that you've put forward, to say it's not good enough that the economy is being held ransom here. How do we build an economy that's sustainable, that gives opportunities to its citizens so that South Africa can become truly the nation that we can be?
Now, the ruling party has indicated that they're making moves towards trying to at least fix some of the energy crisis, especially by means of a nuclear deal, which you and your party believe is just not the way for the country to be going.
Absolutely not. It's not the way forward because South Africans agreed on a national development plan, and the national development plan talks about a diversification of energy. And one of the key issues in there speaks about renewable energy. Now, we're in a crisis now. A nuclear plant will take long to build, it'll be expensive. South Africa cannot afford it. South Africans can't afford the purchase of that electricity, and it will only come online long after this crisis. We are looking at at least a 10-year lead time. So what we've got to look at deliberately now is how do we complete Medupi and Kusile? Those two are vital projects that South Africa should have completed. How do we ensure that we explore other types of renewable energy, whether those are wind, hydro, solar, and gas, that we bring those on stream and ensure that there's diversification. But the most important issue here is, you know, if you run a business, if there's no competition, you have no incentive to work harder. In fact, Eskom go out and tell people to use less of their product. We are saying introduce independent power producers so that there's legitimate competition for Eskom. So you break down its monopoly, you allow for competition, you allow for competition to dictate pricing so that you don't have this increasing price that Eskom keeps asking for as they build. Consumers then have the right to choose. They can say, I want that service provider, that one, so that they themselves, so that we can stabilize the grid. It will do two things. A, it will give us new investment opportunities, but secondly, it will allow for competition and for South Africans to have choice, which is a fundamental issue. So I think we've got to be deliberate about diversifying our energy supply so that we can stabilize the grid, take the grid away from Eskom so that you can stabilize it. And I think we should have done that. The legislation that was on the table, announced coincidentally by the president, was the ISMO bill, as is known. And in the ISMO bill, it articulates the use of independent power producers. And quite frankly, the president has now done a U-turn on that legislation, as President Mbeki did when Eskom told him that they were going to run out of energy. He did a U-turn on the issue. And subsequent to those, we now have load shedding and no light at the end of the day.
Tell me, are you at all optimistic about the ANC's move to have our Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, oversee the turnaround of these types of institutions, the post office being one of them? Is that something that could feasibly work in your mind, or are we looking at just these institutions flailing around again as they have been?
Look, it's not up to me to be able to comment on Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa's own strengths or anything. The reality of it is that the ultimate accountability must always sit with the president, because he must be able to at least understand its broadness. That's why you have cabinet ministers. That's why you have all of that. Now, for example, under Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, many institutions have been put in there. You must ask the question, what do then those ministers do? I don't necessarily believe that, particularly in the energy sector, unless Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has the political capital to be able to convert policy, convert ideology, that in fact he'll be able to turn the situation around. In fact, I don't believe so. He has gone on record saying Eskom is a glorious institution, and I think if you're not willing to accept that there's a crisis, how then do you legitimately deal with it? So you know, strength to him, but I'm certainly not holding my breath. I think there are far more systemic problems that deal with the institutions that he's been given to handle.